Tonight you're going to buy a coffee. And before you even taste it, a screen is going to turn toward you and ask you to leave a tip. You didn't order table service. Nobody carried anything to you. But there it is. 18%, 20%, a custom amount if you're feeling generous. You'll probably tip anyway. Most people do. But have you ever stopped to ask why a $5 lat suddenly comes with a guilt tax attached? The real reason has almost nothing to do with gratitude. It's a business strategy, and it's been quietly rewriting the rules of American spending for the last 10 years. Let's start with where tipping actually came from, because it's stranger than you think. Tipping wasn't born in restaurants. It was imported from European aristocracy in the 1800s, where wealthy travelers gave small sums to servants as a show of status. American workers initially hated the idea. It felt like begging. Several states even tried to ban it outright in the early 1900s. Then came a loophole that changed everything: the tipped minimum wage. After the Civil War, newly freed black workers were funneled into service jobs with no fixed wage at all. Employers argued that tips would cover their pay, so they didn't have to. That argument never really went away. Today, federal law still allows employers to pay tipped workers as little as $2.13 an hour, as long as tips make up the difference. Notice what just happened there. The tip stopped being a bonus. It became the paycheck. So for decades, tipping stayed mostly where it started: restaurants, haircuts, taxis, places with real service, real interaction, real effort you could see. Then, around 2010, something in the checkout counter changed, literally. Square launched its point of sale system, and with it, the tablet screen turned toward the customer. Before Square, adding a tip option to a coffee shop or food truck required awkward jars or verbal requests. After Square, it required one line of code. Suddenly, every business everywhere had the exact same tool restaurants had used for a century, and they used it. This is where behavioral economics comes in, because the tablet screen isn't neutral, it's designed. Researchers call this a default effect. When you're handed a screen with 3 preset tip percentages already selected, your brain treats the middle option as the normal one, even if you've never tipped for this kind of purchase before. Cornell professor Michael Lynn has spent decades studying tipping behavior, and his research shows something uncomfortable. Most people don't decide whether to tip. They decide which preset button feels least embarrassing to press while someone is watching. That's the second ingredient: social pressure. You're standing at the counter. The cashier can see the screen too, sometimes in real time. Selecting no tip isn't a private financial decision anymore. It's a small public performance in front of a stranger with a line of people behind you. A 2022 Pew Research survey found that a majority of Americans said they now feel pressure to tip in situations where they never used to, and most disapproved of prompts appearing at businesses like coffee shops and fast casual restaurants. People know it's happening. They tip anyway. Why? Because saying no costs you something even if the money doesn't. This is where a concept called loss aversion, first documented by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, becomes useful. Their research found that people feel the pain of a loss roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Declining a tip doesn't feel like keeping $2. It feels like actively taking $2 away from a real person standing right in front of you. Businesses didn't need to understand the research to benefit from it. They just needed a screen, 3 buttons, and a moment of eye contact. And here's the twist: almost nobody clocks the more tip requests you see, the less each one means. Economists call this tip fatigue. When tipping expands to every checkout counter, self-checkout kiosk, and online order form, the signal gets diluted. You start tipping out of reflex, not reflection. The specific act that used to reward specific service becomes a blanket tax on almost every transaction you touch. Meanwhile, base pay for many of these jobs hasn't meaningfully moved. The system that started with freed workers in the 1860s and a legal minimum wage loophole is still, in a very real sense, running today. Companies get to advertise lower menu prices while asking customers to quietly subsidize wages at the register. There's a quieter twist underneath all of this too. Some studies suggest that as tip requests spread into places without traditional service, tip amounts at the businesses that always relied on tips, like full-service restaurants, have started to shrink. When tipping becomes universal, it stops feeling special anywhere. So what do you actually do with this information? You're not going to stop the tablet from turning toward you tomorrow, but you can change what happens in the 3 seconds after it does. You can ask yourself a simple question before you tap anything. Is this a job that has historically depended on tips to reach a living wage? Or is this a business using a psychological default to boost its margins for free? Coffee behind a counter and a server bringing food to your table are not the same tipping relationship, even though the screen makes them look identical. You can also just take the extra second, selecting custom amount. And typing 0 feels different than tapping a preset button, and that friction is exactly why most businesses don't make it easy to find. None of this makes you a bad person for tipping when you're unsure. Most people tip out of decency, not analysis. But decency works best when it's a choice, not a default someone else programmed into a checkout screen before you even walked in the door. Tonight, you're going to buy a coffee again, maybe tomorrow too. And a screen is going to turn toward you and ask for a tip. This time you'll know exactly why it's there.